On September 19, 1944, at the cold hour of 06:15 near Aricourt in eastern France, a chilling veil of fog clung to the Lorraine countryside as the formidable Panthers of the 113th Panzer Brigade crept inexorably toward their objectives. Imagine the scene, as recorded in the brigade's after-action report filed with 5th Panzer Army Headquarters. At approximately 20 hours, the lead elements made contact with enemy tank destroyers of an unknown and unsettling type. These enemy vehicles, the report noted with a tone of grudging respect, displayed an exceptional mobility, striking at our tanks from ranges of 400 to 800 meters before vanishing like ghosts into the mist. In the chaos of that initial brutal contact, 3 Panthers were lost, burning hulks, within a mere 5 minutes. Through the disorienting fog, German tank crews began to hear a sound that did not belong, a sound they had never before encountered on any battlefield. A high-pitched engine whine, an almost ethereal scream, more akin to an aircraft than any tracked vehicle they knew. Then, out of the gray emptiness, low, menacing silhouettes materialized, fired a rapid series of devastating salvos, and disappeared before the German gunners could even begin to traverse their heavy turrets to retaliate. You can feel their frustration, as the entire attack pattern from appearance to disappearance lasted less than 20 seconds for each terrifying engagement. Across the battlefield on that fateful morning, the 39 German tanks of the 113th Panzer Brigade, under the command of Colonel Erich von Ponsendorf, were about to be confronted with a terrifying new truth. The Americans had conceived and built a tank destroyer that could achieve a blistering 55 miles per hour, making it faster than any tracked armored vehicle then in existence. While German doctrine was rigidly built upon the assumption that all tank destroyers would be slow, heavily armored fortresses like their own formidable Jagdpanthers, the M18 Hellcat was born from a completely different and far more lethal philosophy. Speed as armor, mobility as survival, agility as lethality. The very mathematics of tank combat were about to be violently and irrevocably rewritten. Consider the cold, hard mechanics of destruction. A Panther's cumbersome turret required between 18 and 60 agonizing seconds to complete a full rotation, its speed entirely dependent on the engine's RPM. The Hellcat's advanced hydraulic turret, in stark contrast, could spin a full 360 degrees in just 24 seconds, a speed utterly independent of the engine's state. At its astonishing top speed of 55 mph, the M18 could cover a distance of 400 meters before a Tiger tank's turret could even struggle to traverse a mere 90 degrees. This paradigm shift began in the tense days of December 1941, when Lieutenant Colonel Andrew Davis Bruce stood before a classified briefing at the War Department. The world was still reeling from the devastating success of German Blitzkrieg tactics, a new form of warfare that had shattered conventional military thinking. Poland had been crushed in 35 days. France, boasting the world's largest army, had collapsed in a humiliating 6 weeks. The Wehrmacht's panzer divisions had proven, in blood and fire, that mobility and concentration could shatter any static defense. Bruce, a man steeped in the cavalry tradition who intimately understood the devastating power of speed and maneuver, put forth a vision that bordered on heresy. He proposed that instead of matching German tanks ton for ton, gun for gun, America would forge a new kind of weapon, a vehicle that hunted tanks the way cavalry had once hunted infantry, through speed, through surprise, and through superior, breathtaking mobility. The tank destroyer force would be guided by a simple, brutal, and effective motto: seek, strike, destroy. Following this vision, the U.S. Ordnance Department issued its requirements for a fast tank destroyer in December 1941. The specifications for this new hunter evolved at a dizzying pace throughout 1942, initially demanding a 37-liter gun, which then grew to 57mm, then 75mm, and finally settled on the potent 76mm gun. The innovative Christie suspension was considered but ultimately dropped in favor of a more robust torsion bar system. By April 1943, Buick's T-70 prototype was already demonstrating speeds that seemed utterly impossible for a tracked vehicle. German intelligence, when whispers of this American project reached them, scoffed at what they perceived as classic American naivety. Wehrmacht doctrine, a doctrine proven and hardened in 4 brutal years of combat, taught that effective tank destroyers demanded heavy armor and overwhelmingly powerful guns, like their own 88mm armed Jagdpanthers, which tipped the scales at a ponderous 46 tons. The very idea that the Americans would field a 17.7-ton vehicle with armor no thicker than a mere 25mm struck them as militarily absurd, a foolish joke. On May 23, 1944, during the Anzio breakout, the Hermann Göring Panzer Division had their first, shocking encounter with the M-18s. The division's daily combat report to the 14th Panzer Corps read like a dispatch from an alternate reality, noting that the enemy employs new tank destroyer type, vehicle speed estimated 70 to 80 km per hour. It went on to state that 2 Panzerfahrers were destroyed before the enemy vehicle simply withdrew, and that all return fire proved ineffective due to the target's rapid, almost unbelievable movement. German crews began to report encounters with vehicles that moved unlike anything in their recognition manuals, describing low-profile hunters that raced across the battlefield at speeds they could only associate with wheeled reconnaissance cars, not tracked vehicles carrying powerful 76mm guns. These unsettling reports reached the highest echelons in Berlin, where they were dutifully filed away as unconfirmed and, more damningly, as likely exaggerations. The German High Command, in their hubris, believed that their experienced, battle-hardened crews were simply overestimating the enemy's capabilities under the immense stress of combat. But it was September of 1944 that would tear the veil from their eyes and reveal the devastating truth in its entirety. The U.S. Third Army's relentless advance through Lorraine had stretched German defensive lines to their absolute breaking point. A furious Hitler personally ordered a counteroffensive with the objectives of recapturing Nancy and destroying Patton's spearhead. To this end, the 5th Panzer Army, under the command of General Hasso von Manteuffel, assembled its finest available units. The newly formed 111th and 113th Panzer Brigades, both equipped with factory-fresh, formidable Panther tanks. Poised to meet them, the 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion, attached to the 4th Armored Division's Combat Command A, had strategically positioned their M18s in the area around Aracourt. As dawn broke on September 19th, the German attack commenced, shrouded in a heavy, disorienting fog. As the sun struggled to pierce the morning gloom, Lieutenant Edwin Leiper's platoon of M18s descended like wraiths, striking with a precision that was nothing short of devastating. According to the 704th's own after-action report, Lieutenant Leiper's platoon engaged the enemy armor at ranges between 400 and 800 yards. By employing their now signature shoot-and-scoot tactics, they destroyed 15 enemy tanks in approximately 30 minutes of furious, decisive combat. On the platoon's flank, Sergeant Henry R. Hartmann's M18 achieved a success so extraordinary it bordered on the legendary. His gunner, with chilling efficiency, knocked out 6 Panthers in rapid succession, each time displacing to a new firing position before the bewildered German tanks could even hope to return fire. For his incredible actions that day, Hartmann would later be awarded the Distinguished Service Cross. For the 113th Panzer Brigade, the results were nothing less than catastrophic. The German divisional records from that day tell a story of shock and disbelief. Brigade engaged enemy tank destroyers vicinity Aracourt. Enemy vehicles demonstrated unprecedented mobility. Estimated speed 80+ kilometers per hour. The butcher's bill was grim. 39 tanks destroyed, 11 damaged. Enemy losses were estimated at a mere 3 to 4 vehicles. When German forces finally managed to capture an intact M18 near Metz in November 1944, Wehrmacht weapons testing officers conducted a thorough, almost frantic examination. Their subsequent technical report, rushed to the Inspector General of Panzer Forces, contained specifications so alien they seemed to defy every established principle of tank destroyer design. The verified specifications were a shock to the system. a weight of 17.7 metric tons versus the Panther's 44.8 tons, a maximum speed of 88.5 km/h, confirmed on their own test track, compared to the Panther's 46 km/h maximum. A Wright R975C4 radial engine generating 400 horsepower, giving it a power-to-weight ratio of 22.6 horsepower per ton, dwarfing the Panther's 15.6 and the Tiger's 12.8. A turret traverse of 360 degrees in 24 seconds, hydraulically powered. Armor with a maximum thickness of 25 mm on the turret front and just 13 meters on the hull sides. A main armament of the 76mm M1A1 or M1A2, and a Torquematic automatic transmission with 3 forward speeds. The German report concluded with a stark, unsettling realization. Vehicle achieves performance through extreme design philosophy. Armor protection sacrificed for mobility. Engine is aircraft type, air-cooled radial. Automatic transmission eliminates clutching, permitting driver to concentrate on maneuvering. Combat effectiveness depends entirely on mobility and crew training. The stark, irrefutable mathematics of speed utterly revolutionized American anti-tank doctrine. The 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion's Combat Manual, updated after the triumph at Aracourt, now specified that M18 employment must emphasize mobility over any direct firepower exchange. The recommended engagement sequence was a deadly dance. Fire 3 to 5 rounds from a concealed position. Immediately displace a minimum of 200 yards. Re-engage from a new position, at a different angle. Never, ever remain stationary for longer than 60 seconds when under enemy observation. This shoot-and-scoot doctrine proved devastatingly effective. German tank crews, meticulously trained for methodical, deliberate engagements at long range, found themselves completely unable to adapt to opponents who simply refused to engage in stand-up fights. On December 19, 1944, Hitler's last great gamble, the German Ardennes offensive, was raging into its third day. The 2nd Panzer Division, spearheading the critical drive toward Antwerp, was approaching the crucial crossroads at Neuville, a position held by Team Desaubry and elements of the 101st Airborne Division. Here, a mere 4 M18s from the 609th and 705th Tank Destroyer Battalions stood against a seemingly unstoppable tide. The very morning fog that had concealed the German advance now became the Hellcat's greatest ally. According to the 705th Tank Destroyer Battalion's combat report, these 4 M18s engaged elements of the 2nd Panzer Division in the fog, using high-speed displacement between their firing positions to create the powerful illusion of a much larger defensive force. The result was astonishing. 24 enemy tanks were confirmed destroyed, with the loss of only 1 M18, and that was to artillery. The Hellcat's strategy was a masterpiece of lethal simplicity. They would fire 2 or 3 rounds, then immediately reverse at full speed, disappearing back into the thick fog. By the time the German tanks could traverse their turrets toward the muzzle flashes, the M18s had already relocated 200 to 300 yards away and were engaging them again from a completely different and completely unexpected angle. The 2nd Panzer Division's war diary for that day tells a story of utter frustration. Encountered strong tank destroyer resistance at Neuville. Enemy vehicles of high mobility operating in fog, unable to effectively engage due to rapid displacement of targets. Attack suspended pending reinforcement. This crucial 48-hour delay proved critical, buying the 101st Airborne the precious time they needed to strengthen Bastogne's defenses and ultimately hold the vital crossroads. By November 1944, German commanders were desperately trying to formulate tactics to counter the M18 menace. A desperate General Hasso von Manteuffel issued new tactical guidance to the 5th Panzer Army. Enemy M18 tank destroyers confirmed, capable of 80+ km/h road speed, 40+ km/h cross-country. Standard engagement procedures must be modified. Do not attempt to track a moving M18 with turret traverse. Pre-position turrets on likely displacement routes. Employ infantry with Panzerfausts on flanks. Use artillery to suppress suspected positions. Avoid pursuit. M18s will always outrun our vehicles. Yet, these were the desperate improvisations of an army confronting a threat it could not comprehend. The M18's speed advantage was simply too vast, and German crews could not overcome years of ingrained training that emphasized deliberate, precise gunnery over the kind of rapid reactive response the Hellcat demanded. The Buick Motor Division manufactured 2,507 M18s between July 1943 and October 1944, with production peaking at 267 units in November 1943. While the original contract had called for 8,986 vehicles, this number was reduced as the war's end drew nearer, and the tank-destroyer doctrine itself evolved. Each M18 cost $55,230 in 1943, relatively expensive due to its specialized engine and transmission, but still eminently mass-producible using America's unparalleled automotive industry techniques. By stark contrast, a German Panther cost approximately 117,100 Reichsmarks and demanded significantly more production time due to its notoriously complex final drive and transmission systems. From its very conception, the M18 was an avatar of American industrial might, designed for rapid mass production. The Wright R975 radial engine was already in production for aircraft and other vehicles. The Torque-Matic transmission eliminated the need for complex driver training. The open-topped turret simplified the manufacturing process, and standard automotive components were utilized wherever possible. The Tank Destroyer Training Center at Camp Hood, Texas, developed specialized and rigorous programs for M18 crews. This training emphasized a skill set entirely different from that of conventional tank operations. Driver training focused intensely on high-speed maneuvering, rapid acceleration and braking, and the tactical exploitation of terrain. Drivers learned to maintain maximum possible speed while simultaneously providing a stable gun platform during the brief, critical halts needed for firing. Gunner training emphasized rapid target acquisition and the difficult art of firing on the move. Unlike their German counterparts, who were trained for deliberate, precise, long-range shots, M18 gunners learned to fire quickly at moderate ranges, accepting a lower probability of a first-round hit, in exchange for the overwhelming advantage of a rapid engagement. Commander training stressed constant battlefield awareness, rapid decision-making, and seamless coordination with other M18s. Commanders learned to think 3 moves ahead, always planning their next 2 firing positions before they even engaged the enemy. Recruiters sought a different breed of soldier, men who thrived on risk, who could make split-second decisions, and who found more solace in agility than in the psychological crutch of heavy armor. Yet the Hellcat's blinding speed was bought at a terrifying price. Its armor was, to be blunt, paper-thin. With a maximum protection of just 25 mm on the turret front and a mere 13 mm on the hull sides, the vehicle was tragically vulnerable to almost every German anti-tank weapon. This included 20mm anti-aircraft guns at close range, 37mm anti-tank guns at any range, Panzerfaust infantry weapons, artillery fragments, and even heavy machine gun fire at close range on its side armor. This profound vulnerability shaped every single aspect of M18 employment. Standard operating procedures became a mantra for survival. Never remain stationary under enemy observation. Avoid urban combat where speed is negated. Maintain a minimum 500-meter standoff from enemy infantry. Use terrain masking continuously. Coordinate with infantry to suppress enemy anti-tank weapons. M18 crews developed an almost supernatural awareness of their surroundings, their eyes constantly scanning for threats, and more importantly, for escape routes. By the war's end, the M18-equipped tank destroyer battalions had compiled verified records that spoke volumes. The 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion claimed 106 enemy tanks, the 603rd claimed 92, the 609th claimed 67, the 705th claimed 89, and the 805th claimed 51. Overall statistics showed a maximum strength of 540 M18s in combat by March 1945, with 216 vehicles lost in combat, resulting in a kill-to-loss ratio of 2.3 to 1 in Europe. The average engagement range was 650 meters, and the average engagement duration was a blistering 2.3 minutes. While the 2.3 to 1 kill ratio was respectable, it actually fell short of pre-war expectations. More significantly, M18s ended up spending approximately 70% of their combat time in infantry support roles, rather than hunting tanks as originally envisioned. The doctrine's fundamental assumption of massed enemy armor attacks proved to be largely incorrect. The rugged terrain of the Italian campaign posed an entirely new set of challenges. The 805th Tank Destroyer Battalion, operating their M18s in the mountainous landscape, quickly discovered that even in such restrictive terrain, the Hellcat's mobility provided decisive advantages. The vehicles could rapidly redeploy between threatened sectors using winding mountain roads where heavier vehicles struggled and faltered. During the brutal battles for the Gothic Line, M18s would race to commanding heights, engage German vehicles in the valleys below, and then relocate before any counter-battery fire could arrive. German forces in Italy, accustomed to the generally ponderous movements of Allied forces in difficult terrain, were repeatedly and fatally surprised by the M18's incredible response times. A German Corps-level report from the Italian front noted with alarm that enemy tank destroyers demonstrate ability to concentrate rapidly at threatened points. Speed of redeployment prevents effective counter-battery fire. The 637th Tank Destroyer Battalion brought their M18s to the Pacific, where they participated in the Philippines campaign. Facing minimal Japanese armor, the vehicles served primarily in bunker-busting and infantry support roles. Here, against the suicidal tactics of Japanese infantry, the open-topped turret became a deadly vulnerability. Crews frantically welded improvised overhead covers and chicken wire screens to defend against grenades and satchel charges. The vehicle's speed did allow for a rapid response to Japanese infiltration attempts, but the dense jungle terrain often negated its mobility advantages. The M18 incorporated several truly revolutionary features that set it apart. First, the Torquematic transmission, a marvel from General Motors that banished the need for manual clutching. Its 3 forward speeds shifted automatically based on speed and load, allowing drivers to concentrate entirely on maneuvering rather than fumbling with gear selection, a critical advantage at high speeds. Then there was the torsion bar suspension, providing an impressive 14 inches of wheel travel. This advanced suspension system allowed for sustained high-speed movement over the roughest of terrain, absorbing impacts that would have crippled vehicles with older leaf spring systems. The heart of the beast was the Wright R975 radial engine, a 9-cylinder air-cooled aircraft engine that provided an exceptional power-to-weight ratio. Early C1 models produced 350 horsepower, while later C4 versions generated a full 400 horsepower. Its air-cooling design also eliminated vulnerable radiators and coolant systems. Finally, the hydraulic turret traverse, powered by an electric motor driving a hydraulic pump, provided a consistent 15 degrees per second traverse regardless of engine speed or vehicle movement, a critical advantage over the manual and engine-dependent German traverse systems. The M18's combat record profoundly influenced post-war armored vehicle development. While the tank destroyer doctrine itself was abandoned and the force was disbanded in November 1945, the reverberations of the Hellcat's success, its defiant proof that mobility could be a potent substitute for armor, echoed across the globe. The Soviet Union developed the PT-76 light amphibious tank and later the BMP infantry fighting vehicle, both emphasizing mobility. Britain created its CVRT series, prioritizing speed for reconnaissance. France built the AMX-13 with its automatic loader to reduce weight. And Germany, in a complete reversal of its World War II philosophy, developed the Leopard 1, which abandoned heavy armor in favor of mobility. Modern wheeled tank destroyers like the Italian Centauro, the Japanese Type 16, and the American M1128 mobile gun system all represent the M18's conceptual descendants, accepting vulnerability in exchange for strategic and tactical mobility. Why, then, couldn't the German forces, renowned for their tactical innovation, effectively counter the M18? Several factors contributed to this failure. First was a crippling doctrinal rigidity. German tank training fanatically emphasized deliberate long-range gunnery, Their crews spent years perfecting precise shooting techniques that were rendered utterly useless against rapidly displacing targets. Second were technical limitations. German turret traverse systems, dependent on engine RPM, simply couldn't match the M18's consistent hydraulic traverse. At idle or low engine speeds, German tanks were virtually helpless against a flanking M18. Third was the profound psychological shock. German tankers had operated with a sense of impunity against most Allied armor for years. The psychological impact of suddenly becoming the prey rather than the predator cannot be underestimated. And finally, a communication breakdown. German tactical radios, already stressed by Allied jamming, couldn't coordinate effective responses to rapidly moving M18s operating in coordinated platoons. In post-war interviews conducted by the U.S. Army's Military History Institute, M18 veterans consistently and emphatically pointed to speed as their primary tool for survival. Staff Sergeant Vernon Miller of the 805th Tank Destroyer Battalion put it bluntly, "We lived by 3 rules: shoot fast, move fast, think fast. If you did all 3, you went home. If you failed at any one, you didn't." Technical Sergeant John Patterson of the 603rd Tank Destroyer Battalion explained the philosophy. The Hellcat wasn't about fair fights. It was about unfair fights in our favor. We'd hit them where they didn't expect, when they didn't expect, and be gone before they knew what happened. And Private First Class Robert Chen of the 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion captured the feeling perfectly. "Every time I climbed into our M18, I knew I was sitting in a tin can. But it was a tin can that could run 55 miles an hour. That speed saved my life more times than any armor could have." The cold numbers tell a story of both astonishing strength and terrifying weakness. Mobility metrics show a top speed of 55 km/h or 88.5 km/h on roads, a cross-country speed of 26 km/h or 42 km/h, acceleration from 0 to 30 mph in 11 seconds, a range of 150 miles on 75 gallons of fuel, and a ground pressure of just 10.5 pea, lighter than many trucks. Combat performance statistics reveal an average of 2.4 enemy tanks killed per vehicle, an average survival time in combat of 67 days, a mechanical reliability of 200 miles between major maintenance, and a crew survival rate of 73% when a vehicle was destroyed. The high crew survival rate was a direct reflection of the vehicle's speed. Crews could often escape even when their M18 was hit. The relatively short combat survival time, however, confirmed the brutal vulnerability of its thin armor. The M18 Hellcat's influence extends far beyond specific vehicles, touching upon fundamental concepts in modern warfare. The modern emphasis on sensor-to-shooter time, the rapid engagement of targets, is conceptually similar to the M18's shoot-and-scoot tactics. Today's active protection systems are a technological attempt to replicate what the M18 achieved through sheer speed, avoiding hits rather than absorbing them. M18 platoons coordinating rapid attacks from multiple directions presaged modern network-centric combat operations. And the M18's very existence demonstrated the power of an asymmetric response, proving that technological superiority doesn't always require matching an enemy's capabilities, but rather negating them. In the Grand Chronicle of the Second World War, the M18 Hellcat endures as a monument to battlefield innovation. Born from the crucible of American industrial capability and tactical creativity, it fundamentally challenged the core assumptions of armored warfare. German tankers, trained to dominate through superior armor and firepower, discovered to their horror that American innovation meant changing the rules of the engagement entirely. The Hellcat's 55 mph top speed wasn't just a technical specification, it was a paradigm shift, a new reality that German tactical doctrine simply could not accommodate. The M18 proved that in warfare, as in nature, survival doesn't always favor the strongest or the most heavily armed. Sometimes it favors the fastest, the most agile, the most adaptable. The German tank crews, watching their carefully aimed shots slice through the empty air where a rapidly disappearing M18 had been moments before, learned this lesson again and again in the killing fields of France. the frozen forests of the Ardennes, and in the final, desperate battles in Germany itself. Today, when military historians analyze the M18 Hellcat, they see more than just a successful tank destroyer. They see American military innovation at its most creative, identifying an enemy's strengths and systematically negating them through unconventional, unexpected means. The German tankers never knew the American Hellcat could reach 55 miles per hour until they faced its lethal reality in combat. That technological surprise, combined with tactical innovation and specialized crew training, created a weapon system that transcended its mechanical specifications. In the end, the M18 Hellcat rewrote the mathematics of armored combat. It proved that protection didn't always require armor, that lethality didn't require the biggest gun, and that battlefield dominance could be achieved through mobility rather than mass. At 55 MPH, it outran not just German tanks, but German military doctrine itself. The ghosts of M18 still haunt modern military thinking. Every time a military planner chooses mobility over protection, every time a commander emphasizes speed of action over deliberate preparation, every time a weapons designer accepts vulnerability to achieve performance, the Hellcat's lesson echoes through the decades. Sometimes the best armor is not being where the enemy shoots. The German tankers of the 113th Panzer Brigade, the 2nd Panzer Division, and dozens of other units learned this lesson in blood and fire. They faced an enemy that refused to fight on their terms, an enemy that turned their greatest strengths into their most fatal weaknesses, an enemy that struck and vanished like phantoms in the fog. They learned that American innovation didn't mean building better tanks. It meant building something entirely different, something that moved too fast for their tactics, too fast for their training, and too fast for their turrets to counter. The M18 Hellcat, 55 miles per hour of pure American audacity, remains the ultimate proof that in the brutal calculus of warfare, speed can be the ultimate weapon. The German tankers never knew the American Hellcat could reach such speeds. By the time they learned, it was already too late. The war was lost not just on the battlefield, but in the realm of imagination, where American engineers dared to trade armor for velocity, creating a predator that hunted the hunters.